a test by the following week. We're just now got there in the last few days. So what have you learned about what went wrong, a month and a half or over the last month and a half or 2 months, and what's going to go right now? What lessons have you learned from the mistakes over the last month and a half or so?
John, I appreciate the question, but it represents a misunderstanding on your part and frankly, a lot of people in the public's part about the difference between having a test versus the ability to actually process the test.
So when you said 4 million tests 7 weeks ago, you were just talking about tests being sent out, not actually being completed? I'm a little confused.
John, I think precisely correct that in my first week on this job, we were informed that HHS, I believe IDT was the vendor, Admiral Giroir, that had distributed 1 million, was distributing another 4 million, and we believe they did. But again, those were tests that, frankly, but for the president's leadership, we'd still be waiting on those tests to be done in many cases.
Okay, so for all you students out there, kids doing class on Zoom, Catherine's chem test Thursday, just tell your teachers you can take the test, but you just can't complete the test, and the vice president says so.
Well, and
but
also,
you still want full credit for all that.
You have to get full credit for that. And, it was, first of all, how outrageous for Mike Pence, how pathetic for Mike Pence to say, but for the president's leadership on testing. History will record that Donald Trump failed miserably on testing. His administration failed miserably on testing, and it left us lurching through the dark. And
proceeded to mislead the American people on where they were with testing every step of the way.
Not even created a public health crisis, but created the economic crisis that we're going through right now. Because, again, we couldn't test, trace, isolate, treat, and let people who were well go out into the workspace. But, Willie, you know what's so interesting about just the blithering idiocy of what Mike Pence said yesterday was that probably a month ago, I was speaking to a governor of a very large state, not New York, a very large state, who told me that when it came to testing, that there was such a shortage because of the White House's ineptitude of the chemicals that were required to make the tests work. He said it would be like the White House bragging about sending out copying machines without ink. He said, well, what good is a copying? Again, I had this conversation in early to mid-March. He said, what good is a copying machine if I can't put ink in the copying machine? And so I never said anything on the air. I thought that was ridiculous. I didn't really believe that the White House would ever posit such a stupid argument. But if you wait long enough, it happens. And it happened yesterday with Mike Pence saying, oh, we gave him the test. They just didn't have the material to complete the test. That's like saying we sent them a copying machine. There's just no ink, so they can't use them.
Yeah, I mean, Vice President Pence is learning from Donald Trump that when you're caught dead on something, point back at the reporter and blame the media for misunderstanding it. What he said effectively was we shipped them out. We don't know what happened after that. We got the 4 million tests out. It doesn't mean they were conducted, which I hate to point out to our audience is the point of testing is to conduct them so we know who has it and who does not have it. But let's, as Vice President Pence tries to revise history there about the president's leadership, let's remember what the president has been saying about testing. Remember, he said, what is the federal government supposed to do? Stand on the street corner and conduct tests? It has been his gut belief that this is on the states, just like PPE is on the states, he says, just like ventilators were on the states, he says. This is a state-by-state problem. He has not taken leadership on testing, and nobody of right mind. Dr. Fauci wouldn't tell you that privately. Dr. Birx wouldn't tell you that privately, that they've done well on testing. In fact, publicly, Dr. Fauci said we've got to double the amount of weekly tests we do before we can even begin to get our arms around this. So that is quite obviously revising history. The president has not taken leadership on testing, and I don't know quite how Vice President Pence looks himself in the mirror after a briefing like that.
I really don't
incredible.
Either. And let's just repeat it again, because the president and Mike Pence lie again about testing. Let's just repeat again what happened in this process. The World Health Organization offered to give the United States of America tests early on so we could begin the process. The Trump administration said no. They refused. The CDC said we'll develop our own tests. The CDC tests were so bad and were so flawed. As the WHO was sending out hundreds of thousands of tests on the same day, the CDC sent out 90 scattered across the different state health organizations. And those 90 CDC tests were so bad, were so inconclusive that by the end of February, the Food and Drug Administration came in and said to the CDC, to Donald Trump's CDC, that it said no to the World Health Organization test. If you were a private company, we would shut you down because your process is so shoddy. Donald Trump's CDC, so shoddy that they would shut him down. Now, Mika, why don't we get to what was said yesterday? Let's introduce the guests and then get to what was said yesterday, because speaking of the CDC, I really want to go back and take a look at what the president said when he was in there in his golf shirt and his campaign hat, and the lie that he made that is going to stay with him through this entire campaign.